Commander Jake Morrison checked his uniform one last time before stepping off the transport ship. His hands were sweaty, but he tried to look calm. Today was the biggest day in human history. He was about to meet aliens for the first time. The Zephyrian space station was massive. It stretched out like a crystal flower in the darkness of space. Lights danced across its surface in patterns that hurt Jake's eyes to look at directly. His team of diplomats followed behind him, all looking just as nervous as he felt. "Remember," said Dr. Sarah Chen, his chief advisor, "they value order and respect above everything else. No jokes, no casual behavior. This is serious." Jake nodded, but inside he was thinking that everything was too serious. That was always his problem. When things got tense, he made jokes. It was just how he dealt with stress. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped into a world that looked like it was made of living glass. The walls seemed to breathe with soft light. The floor felt warm under his feet and strange music filled the air. It was beautiful and alien at the same time. Dozens of Zephyrians waited for them in a long line. They were tall and graceful, with skin that looked like liquid metal. Colors flowed across their bodies like waves. Jake had read about this in the briefings. The aliens talked with words and also with these light patterns on their skin. At the end of the line stood someone who made Jake's breath catch in his throat. She was clearly their leader. She was taller than the others, and the patterns on her skin were more complex. They shifted from deep purple to silver like starlight. Her eyes were large and bright, and when she looked at Jake, he felt like she could see right through him. "I am Queen Zeraleth," she said. Her voice was like music, but there was power in it that made Jake want to bow. "Welcome to our domain, humans of Earth." Jake stepped forward and gave a formal bow like Dr. Chen had taught him. "I am Commander Jake Morrison. We are honored to meet you, Your Majesty." The Queen's skin patterns shifted to something that looked almost like curiosity. "You speak our language well for one so young. Thank you. We studied hard to prepare for this meeting." Jake tried to keep his voice steady. The formal ceremony began. There were speeches about peace and friendship between their peoples. Jake had to sit perfectly still while various Zephyrian officials spoke about trade agreements and scientific exchange. The whole time he could feel the Queen's eyes on him. The problem started during the trade negotiations. The Zephyrians wanted humans to prove they could control their emotions before any real business could happen. They seemed to think that human feelings were dangerous and chaotic. "Your people are too unpredictable," said one of the counselors. "How can we trust beings who cannot control their basic nature?" Dr. Chen tried to explain that emotions were actually a strength for humans, but the Zephyrians looked doubtful. The mood in the room grew cold. Jake could see the patterns on their skin shifting to darker colors. "Perhaps this meeting was premature," another counselor said. "These humans are clearly not ready for civilized discourse." Jake felt his team's hopes crashing down around them. Months of preparation, humanity's first chance at joining a galactic community, and it was falling apart because the aliens thought humans were too emotional. Queen Zeraleth sat perfectly still on her crystal throne. Her face showed nothing, but Jake noticed her hands were clenched tightly. She looked as rigid as a statue. The pressure of being perfect all the time must be crushing, Jake thought. That's when Jake's mouth got him in trouble, like it always did. He leaned over to Dr. Chen and spoke just loud enough for his voice to carry across the silent room. "At this rate, I'll have to marry her just to get a trade agreement signed." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Every single Zephyrian in the room went completely still. The musical background noise stopped. Even the flowing lights on the walls seemed to pause. Jake felt his stomach drop as he realized he had just said something very, very wrong. Queen Zeraleth's skin patterns exploded into colors Jake had never seen before. Bright golds and silvers raced across her body in waves. Her large eyes went wide, and for a moment, she looked less like a perfect alien queen and more like a surprised young woman. "Did he just—" one of the counselors whispered. "The ancient words," another breathed. Dr. Chen grabbed Jake's arm so hard it hurt. "What did you just do?" she hissed. Jake looked around the room at dozens of alien faces staring at him. Some looked shocked, others looked excited, and a few looked angry, but all of them were staring at him like he had just announced he was going to steal their son. I was just making a joke," Jake said weakly. "You know, because the negotiations were going badly and she looked so serious and—" Queen Zeraleth stood up slowly from her throne. When she spoke, her voice was different. Softer somehow, but also more intense. "Commander Morrison," she said, "do you understand what you have just proposed?" "Proposed?" Jake's voice cracked like he was a teenager again. "I didn't propose anything. I just made a comment about marriage," the Queen finished. "You spoke the ritual words of proposal before witnesses in my throne room." The room erupted. Half the Zephyrians started talking at once, their skin patterns flashing so fast it looked like a light storm. The other half just stared at Jake like he had grown a second head. Dr. Chen was frantically flipping through her cultural notes. "Jake, I think you just accidentally proposed marriage to an alien queen." "That's impossible," Jake said. But even as he said it, he could see from the Queen's expression that it wasn't impossible at all. "I mean, there must be some kind of mistake. I don't even know how your marriage customs work." Queen Zeraleth stepped down from her throne and walked toward him. Every step was graceful and measured. When she stopped in front of Jake, he could smell something like cinnamon and starlight. "Among my people," she said quietly, "a queen has not received a marriage proposal in over 1,000 years. The ancient laws are very clear about what happens when such an offer is made." "And what happens?" Jake asked, though he was pretty sure he didn't want to know the answer. The Queen's skin pattern shifted to something that might have been a smile. "If I accept your proposal, Commander Morrison, it becomes binding across the entire Zephyrian Empire." Jake felt the floor drop out from under him. Behind him, he could hear Dr. Chen making small choking sounds. Across the room, some of the counselors looked like they were about to faint. "And if you don't accept?" Jake asked hopefully. "Then you have insulted me in front of my entire court," the Queen replied. "The penalty for such an insult is usually death." Jake stared at her. This was definitely not covered in any of his training manuals. Queen Zeraleth stepped even closer. Now Jake could see that her eyes weren't just bright, they were actually glowing with a soft inner light. "But I find myself curious about your human customs," she said. "Tell me, Commander Morrison, when humans make such proposals, do they mean them?" Jake looked into those glowing eyes and saw something unexpected. Behind all the alien majesty and power, he saw loneliness. Here was someone who had probably never had a normal conversation in her entire life. "Sometimes," he said honestly, "but usually we get to know each other first." The Queen's patterns shifted again, this time to something that looked almost playful. "Then perhaps," she said, "we should follow human custom and get to know each other first." "I accept your proposal, Commander Morrison. Let us see if we are compatible." The throne room exploded into chaos, and Jake realized his life had just gotten very, very complicated. Jake woke up in a bed that was definitely not his cramped quarters on the human transport ship. The ceiling above him glowed with soft patterns that moved like slow lightning. The bed itself seemed to be carved from a single piece of white crystal, but it was surprisingly comfortable. "Oh no," he groaned, sitting up. It wasn't a dream. The events of yesterday came flooding back. His stupid joke, the Queen's acceptance, the chaos that followed. Jake put his head in his hands and tried to figure out how his life had gone so completely wrong. A soft chime sounded, and Dr. Chen's voice came through some kind of hidden speaker. "Jake, are you awake? We need to talk, now." 20 minutes later, Jake sat in what he guessed was a conference room, though it looked more like the inside of a giant soap bubble. Dr. Chen paced back and forth, her hair sticking up in all directions like she had been pulling at it. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she said for the 10th time. "Any idea at all?" "I made a joke that apparently wasn't funny," Jake replied. "How was I supposed to know they had some ancient marriage law?" "Because it's our job to know these things." Dr. Chen waved a tablet at him. "I've been up all night reading their cultural database. Jake, Zephyrian queens don't just rule their planets. They're considered living goddesses. No one has married a queen in over 1,000 years because it's basically considered impossible." Jake rubbed his temples. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Dr. Chen laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Now the entire Zephyrian Empire is talking about nothing else. Their news networks are going crazy. Half of them think you're the fulfillment of some ancient prophecy. The other half think you're an alien invader trying to steal their goddess. What about Earth? What does our government think?" Dr. Chen's expression got even more grim. "Earth is split too. Some people think you've opened an incredible diplomatic opportunity. Others think you've started an interstellar incident that could end in war." Before Jake could respond, the door to the conference room opened. Queen Zeraleth walked in. and Jake immediately felt that strange mix of awe and nervousness that seemed to happen whenever she was around. "Good morning, Commander Morrison," she said. Her skin patterns were shifting through calm blues and greens. "I trust you slept well?" "Yes, thank you, Your Majesty." Jake stood up quickly. "About yesterday, I want to apologize if I—" "There is no need for apologies," the Queen interrupted. "What is done is done. We must now focus on what comes next." She gestured, and the air in front of them shimmered. Suddenly they could see what looked like a three-dimensional map of the Zephyrian Empire. Hundreds of star systems sparkled in the space between them. "My people are excited about our engagement," Queen Zarelith said. "It has been so long since there was anything new in our courts. Some are curious about humans and what this union might bring. Others are concerned about the implications." "What kind of implications?" Jake asked. The Queen's patterns shifted to something more serious. "Among my people, I am not just a ruler. I am connected to the very systems that keep our civilization running. My marriage affects more than just politics. It affects the balance of power itself." Dr. Chen looked up from her tablet. "Your Majesty, what exactly do you mean by connected to the systems?" Queen Zarelith hesitated for a moment. "That is complex to explain to outsiders. Perhaps it is better shown than described." She waved her hand, and the room around them changed. Now they seemed to be floating in space, looking down at a Zephyrian planet. Jake could see cities that looked like crystal gardens and ships that moved between them like schools of glowing fish. "Everything you see is connected to the royal bloodline," the Queen explained. "Our technology, our society, our very survival depends on the energy that flows through those of royal blood. When a queen marries, that energy is shared. If something goes wrong—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Jake could guess. If something went wrong, an entire civilization could collapse. "That's why your people are nervous," Jake said. "Some are nervous," the Queen agreed. "Others see opportunity. They believe that joining with humanity might bring new strength to our empire. Different perspectives, different ways of thinking." A new voice interrupted them. "And others believe it will bring nothing but disaster." Jake turned to see a tall Zephyrian entering the room. This one was different from the others Jake had met. His skin patterns were sharp and angular, and his eyes were cold. "High Priest Thalon," Queen Zarelith said, and Jake could hear tension in her voice. "I was not expecting you." "Of course you weren't," Thalon replied. "You have been too busy entertaining your new pet to consider the consequences of your actions." Jake felt his temper starting to rise. "Excuse me? You will not speak unless given permission, alien," Thalon snapped. "You have already caused enough damage." Queen Zarelith's skin patterns flashed to angry reds. "High Priest, you forget yourself. This human is my chosen consort and will be treated with respect." "Your chosen mistake," Thalon replied. "Your Majesty, I speak for many when I say that this union cannot be allowed to proceed. The risk to our people is too great." "The law is clear," the Queen said coldly. "The proposal was made and accepted. The ancient ways must be honored." "The ancient ways never anticipated an alien proposal," Thalon shot back. "This is an unprecedented situation that requires unprecedented solutions." Jake decided he'd heard enough. "Look, I don't want to cause problems for anyone. If there's a way to undo this whole thing, I'm willing to consider it." Both the Queen and the High Priest looked at him in surprise. "You would withdraw your proposal?" Queen Zarelith asked. Jake thought he heard something like disappointment in her voice. "I would if it meant avoiding a civil war," Jake said honestly. "I never intended for any of this to happen." High Priest Thalon's expression shifted to something like approval. At least the alien shows some wisdom. But Queen Zarelith's patterns were shifting to colors Jake had never seen before. Deep purples mixed with bright golds in ways that made his eyes water. "Unfortunately," she said quietly, "withdrawal is not possible under our law. A proposal once accepted becomes a sacred bond. To break it would be to invite cosmic chaos." "Then what do you suggest?" Dr. Chen asked. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Commander Morrison must prove himself worthy through the traditional trials. If he succeeds, the marriage will proceed and the doubters will be silenced. If he fails, he dies," High Priest Thalon said with satisfaction, "as is proper for one who aims above his station." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Dies? Nobody mentioned anything about dying." "The trials are dangerous," Queen Zarelith admitted. "They were designed to test potential mates for their worthiness to join with divine power. Many have failed." "How many?" Jake asked. "All of them," the Queen replied softly. Dr. Chen grabbed Jake's arm. Jake, you can't seriously be considering this. Jake looked at the Queen, who was watching him with those glowing eyes. For a moment he saw past the alien majesty to something more human. She looked lonely, like someone who had been trapped in a role she never chose. What do these trials involve? Jake asked. High Priest Thalen smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. First, the trial of harmonics. You must demonstrate perfect emotional control by matching your feelings to complex light patterns. Impossible for a chaotic human mind. Second, the Queen continued, the trial of cosmic wisdom. You must solve philosophical puzzles that require understanding of universal truths. And third, Thalen finished, the trial of eternal devotion. You must form a telepathic bond that proves your love is pure and eternal. Since humans lack telepathic abilities, this trial alone will kill you. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he looked up at Queen Zerlith. When do we start? He asked. The Queen's skin patterns exploded into surprised golds and silvers. You accept the trials? I accept, Jake said. But I have one condition. You are in no position to make conditions, High Priest Thalen sputtered. What condition? The Queen asked, ignoring the priest. Jake grinned, and for the first time since this whole mess started, he felt like himself again. I get to do things my way. Human style. If I'm going to fail these trials, I'm going to fail as a human, not as a bad copy of a Zephyrian. Queen Zerlith stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, her patterns shifted to something that looked suspiciously like amusement. Very well, Commander Morrison, she said. We shall see what human methods can accomplish. High Priest Thalen looked like he had just bitten something sour. This is madness. Maybe, Jake agreed. But it's human madness, and sometimes that's the best kind. The trial of harmonics took place in a vast chamber that looked like the inside of a crystal cathedral. Hundreds of Zephyrians had gathered to watch, their skin patterns flickering with excitement and curiosity. Jake stood in the center of the room, feeling very small and very human. The trial is simple, announced the trial master, an ancient Zephyrian whose skin was so pale it was almost transparent. The candidate must demonstrate perfect emotional harmony by matching the sacred light patterns. Each pattern represents a different emotional state. Failure to match even one pattern results in immediate disqualification. Jake looked up at the walls around him. Complex patterns of light began to dance across the crystal surfaces. They were beautiful, but they moved so fast and in such complicated ways that just watching them made his head hurt. You must now reproduce these patterns with your own emotional energy, the trial master continued. Begin. Jake stood there trying to figure out how exactly someone was supposed to make light patterns with emotions. Around him, the Zephyrian audience began to murmur. Their skin patterns were shifting to colors that probably meant, this human is doomed. Then Jake had an idea. He pulled out his emergency kit and started pulling out supplies. LED strips, a portable holographic projector, and most importantly, his biometric scanner that could read heart rate, brain activity, and stress levels. What are you doing? Dr. Chen whispered from the audience. Getting creative, Jake replied. Working quickly, Jake rigged the LED strips to his biometric scanner. Then he connected the whole system to his holographic projector. It wasn't pretty, but it might work. I can't make light patterns with my skin like you can, Jake announced to the room. But I can show you my emotions in a different way. He activated the system. Immediately, lights began to dance around him, but these were different from the Zephyrian patterns. They were wilder, more chaotic, but somehow more alive. As Jake's heart rate changed, the lights changed with it. As his emotions shifted, the colors shifted too. The first pattern appeared on the wall. It was pure, geometric, representing perfect calm. Jake closed his eyes and thought about peaceful things. His grandmother's garden. The sound of rain on a roof. The lights around him shifted to soft blues and greens, not matching the pattern exactly, but capturing something deeper, the actual feeling of peace. A gasp went up from the audience. The trial master looked confused. This is not the proper form, he said. But it is the proper feeling, Queen Zerlith said from her viewing platform. Continue. Pattern after pattern appeared. Love, shown as complex interwoven spirals that Jake reproduced with swirling reds and golds that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Courage, displayed as sharp, aggressive angles that Jake answered with bright, steady beams of white light that grew stronger instead of weaker when faced with darkness. The hardest pattern was sorrow. The Zephyrian version was perfectly controlled. showing grief contained and managed. Jake's response was messy and raw, blues that bled into purples, lights that flickered and dimmed before flaring back to life. It didn't match the pattern, but everyone in the room could feel the genuine emotion behind it. When the last pattern faded, the chamber was silent. Then slowly, Queen Zerlith began to make a sound that took Jake a moment to recognize. She was clapping, something Zephyrians apparently didn't normally do but had learned from studying human culture. "The trial is complete," the trial master announced, though he sounded uncertain. "The candidate has demonstrated emotional expression, though not in the traditional manner. He has shown us that there are many ways to express truth," Queen Zerlith said firmly. "The trial is passed." High Priest Thalen's skin patterns flashed angry reds. "This is not how the trials work. He failed to match the sacred patterns." "He matched the sacred emotions," the Queen replied, "which is what the trial is truly about." After the crowd dispersed, Jake found himself alone with Queen Zerlith in a small garden that seemed to exist inside a bubble of space. Strange alien plants grew in patterns that almost looked musical, and the air smelled like cinnamon and starlight. "That was cleverly done," the Queen said, settling onto a bench that looked like it was grown rather than built. "Thanks," Jake said, sitting beside her, "though I'm not sure I really passed. I just did the best I could with what I had." "That is exactly why you passed," Queen Zerlith replied. "You did not try to become something you are not. You found a way to be genuinely yourself." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the alien plants sway in a breeze that Jake couldn't feel. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said finally. "Of course. Are you actually happy about this engagement? Or are you just going along with it because of your laws?" Queen Zerlith was quiet for so long that Jake wondered if he had offended her. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. "Do you know what it is like to be worshipped, Commander Morrison?" "Can't say that I do. It is very lonely," she said. "For my entire life, every person I have met has seen me as a goddess first and a person second. Or not at all. No one speaks to me casually. No one disagrees with me. No one treats me as though I might have doubts or fears or simple desires." Jake thought about that. "That sounds terrible." "It is," the Queen agreed. "Which is why, when you made your accidental proposal, I found myself curious. Here was someone who had not spent his life learning how to worship me, someone who might actually see me as I am." "And what are you?" Jake asked. Queen Zerlith's skin patterns shifted to something gentle and almost shy. "I am someone who enjoys terrible jokes, apparently. Someone who wonders what it would be like to make decisions based on what I want, rather than what is expected of me. Someone who has spent centuries managing an empire and never once been asked what I dream about when I sleep." Jake looked at her. Really looked at her, past the alien features and the glowing skin and the impossible beauty. What he saw was someone who was just as confused and uncertain as he was. "What do you dream about?" he asked. "Dancing," she said immediately, then looked surprised that she had answered so quickly. "Silly, isn't it? I dream about dancing with someone who doesn't know the proper steps. Dancing badly and not caring because it feels good." Jake grinned. "That's not silly at all. That's one of the best things about being human. Doing things badly because they're fun." The Queen looked at him with those glowing eyes. "Is that what you were doing during the trial? Having fun?" "Part of it," Jake admitted. "But mostly I was just trying not to die." Queen Zerlith laughed, and the sound was like music. "You are very strange, Commander Morrison." "Jake," he said. "If we're engaged, you should probably call me Jake." "Jake," she repeated, testing the name. "It suits you. Simple and direct. What should I call you?" Jake asked. "I mean, when we're alone like this." "Your Majesty seems kind of formal for someone I'm supposedly going to marry." The Queen's patterns shifted to something that might have been a blush. "My name is Zerlith, but no one has used it in so long I had almost forgotten what it sounded like." "Zyrolith," Jake said carefully. "That's beautiful." They sat together as alien stars began to appear in the space above the garden. Jake found himself thinking that maybe this crazy situation wasn't entirely bad. Sure, he was probably going to die in the next trial, but at least he was getting to know someone interesting. "Jake," Zerlith said eventually. "Yeah? The next trial is tomorrow. The trial of cosmic wisdom. It will be much harder than today." "What does it involve?" Zyrolith's patterns shifted to worried purples. "You must answer questions that have no right answers. Solve problems that have no solutions. Demonstrate understanding of truths that exist beyond logic. Jake thought about that. So basically, I have to think like a human instead of a computer. What do you mean? Humans are really good at dealing with things that don't make sense, Jake explained. We live with contradictions all the time. We make decisions based on incomplete information. We solve problems by breaking all the rules. And you think this will help you? Jake grinned. Zyraleth, I accidentally proposed to an alien queen and somehow passed the first trial by hooking Christmas lights to a heart monitor. If that's not cosmic wisdom, I don't know what is. Queen Zyraleth stared at him for a moment, then burst into laughter again. You are either the wisest person I have ever met, or the most foolish. Maybe both, Jake said. Humans are good at that too. The trial of cosmic wisdom took place in a room that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Jake's eyes watered trying to follow the geometry of the walls, which curved in directions that shouldn't have been possible. Floating in the center of the space was a crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light. The candidate will face the eternal questions, announced the trial master. These riddles have been pondered by our greatest philosophers for millennia. Some have no answers. Others have too many answers. All require wisdom beyond normal understanding. Jake nodded, trying to look more confident than he felt. The trial of harmonics had been challenging, but at least it made some kind of sense. This felt like being asked to solve math problems written in a language he didn't speak. The crystal pulsed, and a voice filled the room, not heard with his ears, but somehow understood directly by his mind. First question, what is the weight of silence? Jake blinked. Around him, the Zephyrian audience watched with expectant faces. Some looked curious, others looked like they were already planning his funeral. That's... Jake started, then stopped. His first instinct was to say it was a trick question, but he remembered what Zyraleth had told him about thinking beyond logic. Silence weighs exactly as much as the words that aren't spoken, Jake said finally. Sometimes that's nothing. Sometimes it's heavier than mountains. The crystal's pulsing shifted slightly. Jake took that as encouragement to continue. When my grandfather was dying, he said. He couldn't speak anymore, but his silence said more than any words could have. It was full of love and regret and hope all at once. That silence weighed everything and nothing at the same time. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Queen Zyraleth's skin patterns were shifting through interested golds and blues. Second question, how do you catch tomorrow? This time Jake didn't hesitate. You don't, tomorrow catches you. The trick is being ready when it does. Explain, the crystal demanded. Humans spend a lot of time planning for the future, Jake said. We make schedules and set goals and try to control what's coming. But the most important moments, the ones that really change your life, those usually come out of nowhere, like accidentally proposing to an alien queen when you're just trying to break tension in a room. Several Zephyrians made sounds that might have been laughter. Even High Priest Thalon looked slightly less disapproving. Third question, what is the color of truth? Jake thought about this one longer. He looked up at the impossible ceiling, then around at the faces watching him. Truth doesn't have a color, he said. It has all colors and no colors. It changes depending on who's looking at it and when they're looking. The truth about me a week ago was that I was just a human diplomat trying not to mess up first contact. The truth about me now is that I'm a confused guy who might be falling for someone he barely knows. Both of those things are true, even though they contradict each other. The crystal went silent for a long moment. Then it pulsed brighter than before. Final question, what is the greatest power in the universe? Jake smiled. This one he knew. The power to change your mind, he said. Everything else, strength, technology, magic, whatever, those are just tools. But the ability to look at something you've always believed and say, maybe I'm wrong, that's the power that creates new worlds. The trial master looked confused. That is, not the answer we expected. Good, Jake replied. If I'd given you the answer you expected, what would that prove? That I can memorize your philosophy books? Anyone can do that. But thinking differently, that's what wisdom actually is. Queen Zyraleth stood up from her viewing platform. The trial is complete. The candidate has demonstrated true cosmic wisdom, the understanding that wisdom itself cannot be contained in simple answers. High Priest Thalon's skin patterns flashed angry reds. This is absurd. He's making up answers as he goes along. Yes, the queen replied calmly. That is exactly what wisdom is. The ability to find truth in new situations, not just repeat old truths in familiar ones. As the crowd dispersed, Jake noticed that more Zephyrians were looking at him with curiosity now instead of suspicion. Some even made gestures that he thought might be respectful. Maybe he was actually getting somewhere. But his good mood didn't last long. That evening, Dr. Chen came to find him with urgent news. "Jake, we have a problem," she said, looking more worried than he'd ever seen her. "I've been digging deeper into the Zephyrian cultural database, and I found something disturbing." They met in Jake's quarters along with Queen Zeralith, who had insisted on being present for any important discussions. "What did you find?" Jake asked. Dr. Chen activated her tablet and holographic displays filled the air around them. Information about what Zephyrian queens actually do. It's not just ceremonial, Jake. They're literally the power source for their entire civilization. "What do you mean?" Zeralith asked, though her skin pattern suggested she knew exactly what Dr. Chen meant. "Your queens aren't just rulers," Dr. Chen continued. "They're living batteries. Their life force powers your cities, your ships, your technology. That's why they live so long, but also why they can never leave their thrones for extended periods." Jake stared at Queen Zeralith. "Is that true?" Zeralith's patterns shifted to reluctant admission. "It is more complex than Dr. Chen suggests, but essentially accurate. Those of royal blood are connected to what you might call the grid that powers our society. And that's why no queen has ever married," Dr. Chen said, "because sharing that power could destabilize everything." "But you agreed to marry me anyway," Jake said to Zeralith. "Why?" Queen Zeralith was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I am dying." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. "What?" "The power that flows through me is finite," Zeralith explained. "Each generation it grows weaker. I am the last of my line, and when I die, the connection will be broken forever. My people have been searching for a solution, but they haven't found one," Jake finished. "No, which is why some of them see you as either salvation or damnation. If our union somehow strengthens the connection, it could save our civilization. If it breaks what little connection remains, everyone dies," Jake said. "Everyone dies," Zeralith confirmed. Dr. Chen looked between them. "Jake, this changes everything. You're not just risking your own life anymore. You're gambling with an entire species." Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The lights in the room shifted to harsh reds and emergency announcements echoed from hidden speakers. "What's happening?" Jake asked. Queen Zeralith's skin patterns exploded into shocked whites and golds. "Those are rebellion alarms. Someone is attempting a coup." The door to Jake's quarters burst open, and High Priest Thalen entered with a squad of armed Zephyrians. But these weren't the ceremonial guards Jake had seen before. These looked like soldiers, and their weapons were pointed directly at him. "I am sorry it has come to this, Your Majesty," Thalen said to Queen Zeralith, "but we cannot allow this madness to continue." "Thalen, what are you doing?" Zeralith demanded. "What must be done?" the High Priest replied. "This alien has bewitched you. He threatens everything our people have built. The Conservative Council has voted. He must be eliminated before he can complete the final trial. The law clearly states..." Zeralith began. "The law was written before aliens existed," Thalen interrupted. "Extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures." Jake stepped forward, putting himself between the weapons and Queen Zeralith. "If you want to stop the marriage, fine, but leave her out of it." Thalen's expression was cold. "Noble but pointless. You will both be detained until a proper solution can be found." That's when Queen Zeralith did something Jake had never seen before. Her skin patterns exploded into colors so bright they hurt to look at, and the temperature in the room dropped by 20 degrees. "You forget yourself." "Thalen," she said, and her voice carried power that made the crystal walls resonate. "I am still your queen." "Not for much longer," Thalen replied, but Jake noticed that he and his soldiers had taken a step back. The standoff was broken by Dr. Chen's tablet chiming with an urgent message. "Jake," she said urgently, "we're getting reports from all over the station. It's not just Thalen. There are uprisings on 3 different levels. Some people are trying to stop the marriage, others are trying to protect it. A civil war," Queen Zeralith said quietly. "I had hoped it would not come to this." "It doesn't have to," Jake said suddenly. "Thalen, you said you wanted to stop me before I could complete the final trial, right?" "Yes. What if I complete it right now? What if we settle this once and for all?" Thalen looked suspicious. The trial of eternal devotion requires preparation, ceremonial chambers. The trial of eternal devotion requires love, Jake interrupted. Everything else is just decoration. He turned to Queen Zeralith. Zeralith, I know we barely know each other. I know this whole situation is crazy. But I also know that in the past few days I've gotten to see who you really are behind all the ceremony and worship, and I like what I see. Her skin patterns shifted to surprised golds.
Jake, what are you saying?
I'm saying that maybe this whole mess happened for a reason. Maybe the universe has a sense of humor, and maybe, just maybe, two people from different worlds can find something real together. Jake took her hands in his. They felt warm and slightly electric. I can't form the wedding ceremony took place in the Grand Assembly, a massive space that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. Representatives from across the Zephyrian Empire had gathered, their skin patterns creating a living light show that took Jake's breath away. Even more surprising, several human ships had arrived, carrying diplomats and reporters who wanted to witness this historic moment. Jake stood at something that might have been an altar, though it looked more like a small planet made of crystal. He wore a modified version of traditional Zephyrian ceremonial robes, which had been adjusted to fit his distinctly non-Zephyrian body. The fabric seemed to be alive, shifting colors in response to his emotions. Dr. Chen stood beside him, serving as his cultural advisor and unofficial best man. She looked almost as nervous as Jake felt. Remember, she whispered, when they ask you to recite the eternal promises, just speak from the heart. The translator will handle the formal language. Jake nodded, though he was barely listening. He was watching Queen Zeralith approach from the far end of the assembly, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Her wedding garments seemed to be made of captured starlight. They flowed around her like liquid mercury, and with each step new patterns of light cascaded across the fabric. Her skin glowed with soft patterns that Jake was beginning to recognize as happiness mixed with nervousness. When she reached the altar, she took her place beside Jake. The crowd fell silent, and the trial master, who was apparently also authorized to perform weddings, began the ceremony. We gather today to witness something that has never happened before, the trial master announced. The joining of two species, two worlds, two forms of consciousness. What we do here today will echo through the cosmos for generations to come. The ceremony began with traditional Zephyrian rituals that Jake didn't understand, but tried to follow respectfully. There was singing that sounded like whale songs mixed with wind chimes, and participants threw what looked like glowing flower petals that dissolved into sparkles before they hit the ground. Then came the part Jake had been dreading, the eternal promises. Commander Morrison, the trial master said, do you promise to share your life force with Queen Zeralith? To let your energy flow with hers for all time? Jake looked at Zeralith, who gave him an encouraging nod. I promise, Jake said, to share everything I am with Zeralith. My energy, my thoughts, my terrible jokes, and my complete inability to understand cosmic protocol. I promise to love her not because she's a queen, but because she's the most amazing person I've ever met. I promise to dance badly with her, to argue with her when she's wrong, and to support her when she's right. And I promise that no matter how weird things get, and with us they're probably going to get really weird, I'll always choose her. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Several Zephyrians were making gestures that Jake thought meant approval. Queen Zeralith, the trial master continued, do you promise to share your divine essence with Commander Morrison? To let him partake of the cosmic forces that flow through your bloodline? Zeralith's skin patterns shifted to the most beautiful display Jake had ever seen. Golds and silvers and colors that didn't have names, all flowing together like a sunset on an alien world. I promise, she said, to share with Jake not just my power but my heart. He has shown me what it means to be seen as a person rather than an icon. He has taught me that wisdom can come from chaos, that strength can come from vulnerability, and that sometimes the most profound truths are found in accidental jokes. She turned to look directly at Jake, and her eyes were glowing brighter than ever. I promise to learn from his humanity, to let his chaos balance my order, and to never forget that the best things in life are often the ones we never planned for. I promise to love him not despite his imperfections, but because of them, because they remind me that being flawed doesn't mean being broken. Jake felt that strange sensation in his chest again, like something was connecting that had always been meant to be connected. Around them, the air itself seemed to be glowing. "The bond is forming," the trial master said, and there was wonder in his voice. "I can see it with my own eyes. What's supposed to happen now?" Jake whispered to Dr. Chen. "Nobody knows," she whispered back. "This has never happened before." What happened next was unlike anything in any of the ancient texts. Jake felt Zeraleth's consciousness brush against his own, not invasively but like a friend knocking gently on a door. He opened himself to the connection, and suddenly he could sense what she was feeling. Nervous excitement, deep joy, and underneath it all, a steady warmth that he realized was love. But the connection flowed both ways. Through their bond, Zeraleth experienced human emotions for the first time. The chaos that her people feared so much wasn't destructive. It was creative. Jake's thoughts bounced around like excited puppies, finding unexpected connections and solutions that her orderly mind would never have considered. "Oh," Zeraleth said softly, and Jake could feel her amazement through their link. "This is what it's like to be human. And this is what it's like to see the universe from a cosmic perspective," Jake replied, marveling at the vast, interconnected patterns he could suddenly perceive through her consciousness. The energy flowing between them was affecting the entire space station. The lights were brighter, the air felt cleaner, and Jake could swear that even the artificial gravity felt more natural. "The power grid," someone called out. "It's stabilizing." Through the connection, Jake understood what was happening. The Zephyrian technology had been designed to work with ordered, controlled consciousness, but it had been slowly failing because pure order couldn't adapt to the chaos of a living universe. Jake's chaotic human thoughts were providing the random elements the system needed to truly function. "I pronounce you joined in eternal bond," the trial master declared. "May your union bring prosperity to both your peoples." The crowd erupted in celebration. Colors exploded across 1,000 alien faces, and the humans in attendance began applauding and cheering in their own chaotic way. Jake and Zeraleth looked at each other, both still adjusting to the strange new connection between them. "So," Jake said, "how do you feel about being married to a human?" Zeraleth's skin patterns shifted to something that was definitely amusement. "Ask me again in 100 years. If you survive that long, why wouldn't I survive?" "Because," Zeraleth said, grinning in a very unqueenly way, "I just realized that our bond has given you an extended lifespan. You're going to be around long enough for me to teach you proper cosmic protocol." Jake groaned dramatically. "Great. I accidentally proposed to an alien queen, and now I'm going to spend the next century in etiquette classes." "Among other things," Zeraleth replied, and there was something in her tone that made Jake's face turn red. The celebration continued for hours. Jake found himself talking to Zephyrian citizens who were fascinated by human culture, while Zeraleth spent time with the human diplomats, learning about democracy and individual rights. The cultural exchange had already begun. Later, as the formal festivities wound down, Jake and Zeraleth found themselves alone on an observation deck that looked out at the stars. "Do you think this will actually work?" Jake asked. "Two different species trying to build something together?" Zeraleth considered the question, her patterns shifting thoughtfully. "I think," she said finally, "that we've already proven it can work. Look at us. A week ago we were strangers from different worlds. Tonight we're partners in the most unlikely marriage in galactic history." "Partners," Jake repeated. "I like that better than husband and wife. It sounds more like a team." "We are a team," Zeraleth agreed. "And we have work to do. My people need to learn that change doesn't have to be frightening. Your people need to learn that there are perspectives beyond their own world." Jake thought about that. "So basically we're going to spend our marriage playing cosmic marriage counselors for two entire civilizations?" "Essentially, yes. And you're okay with that?" Zeraleth moved closer to him, and Jake could feel her contentment through their bond. "Jake, 3 days ago I was the loneliest person in the galaxy. Tonight I'm married to someone who makes me laugh, who challenges me to think differently, and who sees me as a person rather than a goddess. If part of our job is helping our people understand each other, that seems like a small price to pay." Jake put his arm around her, marveling at how natural it felt despite everything that was alien about her. "Besides," Zeraleth continued, "I have a feeling you're going to keep accidentally triggering ancient protocols and causing diplomatic incidents. Someone needs to help you navigate the aftermath." "Hey," Jake protested. I've been doing better. I haven't accidentally declared war on anyone or claimed any new territories. The day is young, Ziraleth replied solemnly, then ruined the effect by laughing. They stood together, watching the stars and feeling the strange new connection between them. Through the bond, Jake could sense the vast network of Zephyrian civilization, stronger now and more stable than it had been in centuries. And Ziraleth could feel the chaotic creativity of human thought, opening up possibilities she had never imagined. You know, Jake said eventually, when I woke up last week, if